And they ended up getting that quarterback they drafted in the 8th. Interesting. Wow. All right. So before we get into all of that, because like I promised everybody, we got a lot of football talk tonight. So joining us, I previously had a Colts content guy from the Blue Stable in the past and talking a lot about just overlooking with the Colts this year, the last year. So this year, it'll be really interesting. We're bringing the juice tonight. And so joining me here, Derek Larger of Bringing the Juice podcast joins us. Derek, well, I'm telling you right now, I think the AFC South is really cooking up, and there's a lot of competition to go around. The Texans start beefing up. The Titans, I think, have figured out their offensive line from both their tackles, and then the Jags, they were on a hot streak, and then all of a sudden they fell off. Now they're trying to really redeem themselves after last year, but then there's the Colts. Kind of shaping up what last year gave us, because I've said it before, Shane Steichen is a rock star. I mean, the guy, a very offensive innovator, got both Gardner Minshew and Anthony Richardson at their best potential. So recapping last year, what were some of the takeaways that you got? Because also, I mean, I didn't even know much about Josh Downs, and then all of a sudden I watched this kid play, and I'm like, wow, they finally got their receiver, and they go add another one with Adonai Mitchell. So what were your takeaways through last season?
Yeah, I mean, it was, of course, what we wanted to see last year was Anthony Richardson be able to do what he did. But, of course, his season came to an end early in the Titans game where he messed up his shoulder. And now he's back and ready to prepare for that second year. But last year, you really got a chance to kind of see what Shane Steichen can do as a head coach. We obviously saw what he did as for player personnel. We saw what he's been as an offensive coordinator for a couple different teams. And I mean, everywhere he goes, offenses typically get a lot more creative. They get a lot more open. They tend to do a lot of great things with Shane Steichen. And of course, we saw that with the Indianapolis Colts. And the Indianapolis Colts, I mean, they had no business being a top 10 offense last year when you look at the numbers, but especially with Gardner Minshew as a quarterback, who has always been a backup that sometimes gets in because of injuries, and a running back room that was depleted with injuries, and a wide receiver room that, you know, also had a few injuries here and there, but it was really the Michael Pittman show all year, and the tight end group was also injured. There was so many injuries last year for the Indianapolis Colts. Like, it was insane. But that offense was still able to put up 23.5 points a game, which put them at 9th overall in the NFL, despite not having Jonathan Taylor for half the year, Anthony Richardson for the majority of it. So you got to see Shane Steichen lead an offense that wasn't well put together at that time because a lot of the weapons were injured and just weren't able to be out on the field. And then as well with the defense was bad last year. I know that the Colts had the 5th most sacks of any team in the NFL last year, but even with that, their pass rush efficiency was terrible, and their secondary was as young as could be, and it was depleted as all could be with injuries. And yet you were a few plays away from being the AFC South divisional champs. Like, that's what we were talking about is, you know, people keep dogging on the Colts and saying that that they didn't do much of anything and that they won't be anything this year. Like, last year, they were within a few throws away from winning it all. So it really is a lot closer than what people think. And I mean, last year, outside of the Titans, I mean, there was a 3-way battle for whoever was going to win that division. Now this year, going into it with Tennessee doing as much as they did, I mean, you could make a legit argument that every team in this division could potentially win the AFC South if a few things go the way that they want to. So last year it was competitive as could be. And I mean, it was fun, but this year I mean, this is definitely the most competitive division in all of the NFL right now.
Yeah, I honestly do believe that the South has gotten a lot better. It's much more competitive. And I mean, what we saw last year with what the Texans was able to do with a new coach, a new culture, they turned a lot of things around and now they've really stacked up offensively and defensively. But I've always said that like the Colts always seem to be like that middle of the pack type team. But anytime they get going, they're a force like you do not even want to mess with. So when I look at Anthony Richardson, he's coming back from injury. And my thing with him is that he's a tough build. He's somebody that I think you could really utilize a lot of his legs, but he also has a very accurate throwing arm. So when you think of his campaign this year, is this kind of something that we're awaiting to see Anthony Richardson fully hit that peak of his potential?
I mean, it'll be tough to say that this year we're going to see the peak of his potential. I think this year is just going to be a warm up. I mean, remember, this guy is only 21 years old and he is super young. I think he just turned 22, if I'm not mistaken, which, I mean, ironically enough, it's 2 years younger than Michael Penix, who the Falcons just drafted this year. So, I mean, he is a very young guy. He was very raw coming out of college. And so he has a lot of things that still needs to be fine-tuned. But, I mean, his intelligence is there. His commitment to the game is there. His maturity is off the charts. And, I mean, this guy is just a football magnet. He wants nothing more than to just win football games. And that's what you want as a quarterback. And I think this year we won't even see the best of Anthony Richardson. And I think that this year he will be if he plays at least 15 games this year, I will definitely sit here and say that he is going to be an above average quarterback. I would even suggest that he could potentially be on the knocking door of top 10 after this year. That's how high I think he can be for his ceiling. And that's not even the best that I know this kid can become, because he still has to get more accurate, which is something he's going to have to improve upon, which is fine because he's going to have some extra years to work on it. But the throws and the plays that this kid can make, I mean, if he plays all year or plays the majority of the year, I think a lot of people are going to be shocked about just how good this kid can be, because everyone keeps saying the same thing. The injury. They only talk about him because of the injury and whether or not he's going to actually be good. I will remind people, last year in 9 quarters of football had 7 touchdowns. I mean, people say, oh, it was just 9 quarters. But that's the point. As the most raw guy that we have seen come into the NFL in a long time, be thrown into a starting roster the way he is, and to get that many touchdowns as a young athlete trying to figure it out still. I mean, what happens when this kid does figure it out? When he does figure it out, oh my gosh, the league is going to be in trouble. And I think people don't want to realize that or don't think it can happen. But this year, I'm very excited to see what Anthony Richardson can actually do and see if, he's improved any from last year.
God, quarterback play is going to be so stacked this year that there's so many names that's out there that I can't even begin to tell you, just like a whole wave of new quarterbacks than what we've been used to seeing in the last few years. I'm just excited for all of them. So a player that I do believe is bound to really prove himself than where he was drafted at, Adonai Mitchell. So a lot of receivers that were taken beforehand, like Malik Neighbors and a couple others, I think people are not really paying that close of attention of what Adonai Mitchell really can mean to this offense. And knowing how clever Shane Steichen is as a head coach, where do you kind of see Adonai Mitchell really plugging into this offensive weaponry? Because after what we got from Pittman and what I got from Josh Downs, I think he's coming into a very good situation that I think Steichen really will utilize him in the best situations.
Oh, 100%, because he's coming in with all the expectations, and people were talking about him through the whole draft process, but you don't have to have him come in and be the guy, right? Like you said, he's probably going to be receiver 3 on this unit, which is a fantastic thing for a young wide receiver who has all the talent in the world, but is still trying to figure out his spot in the NFL. And that's great. He doesn't have to be leaned on to make all the big plays. He just has to be a contributor. He just has to play his role. And it's going to be interesting to see what he does this year, because like you said, Michael Pittman, he's going to continue to be the workhorse. Josh Downs' role is only going to continue to rise as long as he remains healthy. Adonai Mitchell, he's been interesting, man, because him and Alec Pierce have kind of been battling for snaps right now. They'll both be used in some kind of role. I'm not 100% sure what that kind of role is going to be with Shane Steichen, but I will say this. I mean, I've been watching through training camp ever since this kid has gotten here, and I look at it and I'm like, how in the world did the NFL allow this kid to fall to 52 to the Indianapolis? I don't understand it. I know the reports came out and people were saying, oh, like he has character issues, or, oh, we're worried about his diabetes that he has. Like, he's gotten a personal chef. He's been taking his medicine. He's been on track with it. The Colts are making sure of that. And he has just been an absolute burner on the field. Like, nobody can guard him. There has yet to have been one person that I've seen throughout this offseason so far that has even come close to locking this kid down. I mean, he is a route technician at its finest. And we're talking about it. He should have been a first-round draft pick last year. Let's be completely honest. He should have been, but he fell all the way because a couple teams fell into the, oh, I don't know about this anonymous report stuff. And the Colts didn't buy into it. And he's looked fantastic. And I'm very excited to see what Shane Steichen does with Adonai Mitchell. And as long as he remains healthy, I mean, he's going to have a great rookie campaign.
Finally, before we move on, because, yeah, I'm excited about AD, and especially with this offense, I think this is one that, the competition, you're going to see it. I mean, I believe the Texans and the Colts, they're going to battle this thing out in the South, and I do think it's going to be exciting to watch. How do you really preview the Colts this year? Because given everything that has been addressed during the offseason, in the draft, and here we are with the competition around them with the other 3 teams in this division. How do you preview the Colts this upcoming season, and where do you have them as far as record-wise?
Well, I mean, for the most part, this is pretty much the exact same team as the 2023 team. I mean, Indianapolis did practically nothing in the offseason outside of draft. The main things they did, they brought in Joe Flacco as a backup quarterback, and you brought in Raekwon Davis as a backup defensive tackle. Outside of that, you just re-signed all of your guys. You brought back Michael Pittman, you brought back Kenny Moore, you brought back Grover Stewart and a couple other guys, and they redid a few extensions. So, they were really focused this offseason on just keeping the entirety of the unit of their core guys in the building, which I love and I respect that. But at the same time, it's also left you with, we have $25 million in cap still left. Yep. And we have a lot of cap still left to spend. But yet the Colts don't seem very interested in actually using it. And just off of what I was looking at before I came on here with people talking about the joint practice that they were having with Arizona, I mean, Indy's secondary was getting cooked. Like, I mean, they were getting cooked. So, I mean, Colts fans like myself have been saying through the entire offseason that Ballard needs to do something to address his secondary, but for some reason he feels that they don't need to, when it's clear as day that the Indianapolis Colts secondary gets torched by every quarterback that we play, which is a sad reality that the GM doesn't see what the fans are seeing right in front of our very eyes. That's going to definitely be a little bit of a concern, but I will say this. It is practically the same team as last year. You won 9 games last year, but this year your head coach is a year into the system, a year more comfortable being a head coach. Anthony Richardson's coming back. If he remains healthy, his play is going to increase tenfold the quarterback play that you had with Gardner Minshew last year. If the guys at pivotal positions stay healthy for the majority of the year, like Jonathan Taylor, like the wide receiver room, like the secondary and the defensive line, if those guys stay healthy, then this team will be just as good, if not better, next year. And this is a team that won 9 games. They can easily go and win 10 games this year, quite possibly 11 if things go the way that they want to. As long as Anthony Richardson remains healthy and as long as the team does what it needs to do, they can't. I have their ceiling at 11 wins on the year, but I've always held the idea that they would go 10-7 this year. It gives them a fighting chance at the division. I don't know if it does win them the division unless something tragically bad happens to the Texans, like from the injury front. I don't know if 10 wins is going to do it for them, but it'll keep them competitive. It'll keep them in the playoff picture. I think it gets them at least a playoff win or at least a trip into the playoffs. So, yeah, 10-7 seems about right for me.
I'll tell you what, though. I mean, this is my hottest take, but I do feel like in the AFC, I think we're going to get 4 teams that will end up 10-7 that I do believe are going to be fighting for those wild card spots. But that's the expectation of the AFC. It's just so stacked, it's loaded, and there's competition everywhere. So I'm excited for what the Colts are really going to bring. But Derek, appreciate you coming on by, man. Where can people find you to getting you everything, all access of the Indianapolis Colts?
Appreciate it. Yeah, you guys can find us on YouTube, anywhere that you guys listen to podcasts. We're on it. Bring the Juice podcast. You guys can follow me on Twitter at Derek_Larger and follow us on X for our podcast as well at BTJ Pod.
There you go. Derek always bringing the juice, man. Appreciate you coming on by. Good luck, at least with this season. We shall see, and I'm keeping an eye out for how Shane Steichen really is going to manage this Indianapolis Colts group. Appreciate you coming on by, man. Take care of yourself.
Sounds good. Thank you, man.
Absolutely. All right, moving on next.